welcome back to the channel. My name is Lulu. I've been going by Call Me Lulu, but I think I'm gonna start going by the Bookish Cowgirl just because I've heard from many people that Call Me Lulu is hard to find if you're searching it. Today, I'm gonna be talking about what I read for the rest of 2025. I made this video earlier in the year, a couple months ago, about everything I'd read up until about September. And now I'm gonna talk about the books I read in that late bit of the year. Percy, come here. Percy, she don't like you. Yeah. So I think I finished about 9 books since I made that video, and then I realized there was one book I forgot to talk about that I read way earlier this year, but I still want to talk about it in this. So we'll be going over 10 books total. The first book I wanted to talk about was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I listened to this in audiobook form with my husband while we were on a road trip. Loud animal noises in the background. I'm so sorry. I listened to this with my husband while we were on a road trip. It is, you probably know the plot of Frankenstein, but a young scientist, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, creates life by cobbling together a creature of different corpses. This story was really interesting and definitely an essential read. No one told me this was going to be an epistolary novel. Which it is. It's told through like a series of letters, or letters are a very big component of the story. And I tend to really despise epistolary novels. And I think I'm in the minority with that, but I really hate epistolary novels. And I think just in this one, I really hated the epistolary aspects of it, but I didn't hate the novel as a whole, which I think is a win for Frankenstein. Also, like, all of the characters in this are just like peak gothic angst. Like, they're all like, oh my goodness, should I be alive? Am I morally good? What is the best thing? What are other things they said in Frankenstein? What are some angsty bits of Frankenstein?
The doctor said.
Basically anything the doctor said was angsty.
Basically anytime the monster killed somebody, he was like, I practically did it myself. And like really just belabored that point.
Yeah. So yeah, anytime Frankenstein's monster kills somebody, Frankenstein is like, I basically did this myself, like this is all me. But like not in an introspective way, like not necessarily in a way where it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have created like a monster who didn't ask to exist. And then anytime the monster kills somebody, he's like, oh, but I'm just a little monster and I didn't ask to exist. I exist in this state and I must just kill people. Yeah, but it's like, it's very angsty. I would say if you like a good like dark prince in your novels, this is maybe a novel for you. And if you like epistolary novels, this is maybe a novel for you. I do not like either of those things, and this was not a novel for me. But on the audiobook we listened to, Dan Stevens did the narration, and I think he did a wonderful job. I appreciated that. Next, I want to talk about The Wood at Midwinter by Susana Clarke, which I'm excited to talk about because I think a lot of people who watch this channel regularly, not that a lot of people watch this channel regularly, I think people on this channel tend to like to talk about Susana Clarke, so I'm excited to talk about this. I took this book very slow because it is an entry in the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell universe, and we never know when we're getting another one of those. So I got this book last November. I started it in, I think, July or June, and I just finished it up recently, which is a long time to read a book, but also is an even longer time when you realize that it is only 50 pages long, and it is illustrated. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful. Like, I love the detail that like went into this book. This is like the classic, incredible, beautiful, resonant Susana Clarke prose that I just connect to, I think, more than I connect to any other writing in the world. Yeah, the illustrations were everything, the lore was everything, but it is only 50 pages long, and I think I could have been okay with that had the story been more compressed. But I think it essentially feels like an unfinished story. There's a lot of build, and then it all kind of tumbles together very quickly. Basically, the whole time, the protagonist is hearing about this event that may happen to her that may turn her into like a true saint. She wants to be one with the forest, but she also wants a child, and the forest is telling her that she can get that, but it will be a kind of scary process to that sort of like, it's described as Victorian, but I think that Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell universe is Regency, so I think it's probably a Regency period. Like, because of the Regency period culture around her, a young woman becoming one with the woods is kind of a scary thing. There's a point in this story where it ends on a note that's basically like, and when this thing happens to you, that's the big thing we've been talking about the whole time, don't be afraid. And then it like wraps up in basically a paragraph that was like, oh yeah, she was afraid when it happened. And it's like, I wanted to see that whole process of the end happening. It just like ends very quickly. I think this story honestly could have taken an extra 50 pages just to complete as a story. I don't even mean that selfishly, like as someone who loves to read Susana Clarke, I just think like on a craft level, this could have been like really expanded on the back end in order to deliver everything that it was promising at the beginning. But like the last 20 pages are just an author's note, and I really think that those like 20 pages at least could have expanded the story into something like much more whole and complete, but I still loved it. Still one of my top reads of the year. Next, I want to talk about Girls and Their Horses by Eliza Jane Brazier. I also talked about this in my Books to Read for Horse Girl fall video, but I didn't get very descriptive. This is about a newly rich family from Texas who moves to California, and the mom really pushes her kids into the world of show jumping in like the ultra wealthy area of California that they're in. The plot in this is incredibly fast-paced. The prose is like very simple, but I think it's like effective. There are still, everything in it is telly, but there are still some moments of telling that are great. It also uses the same kind of like interview plot, like police interview plot, dual timeline structure that If We Were Villains, yeah, the same dual timeline structure that If We Were Villains uses, where it's like switching between police interviews after the fact and the mystery as it's unfolding. But I think this one has so much more payoff and like gets so much more out of that structure. So I really liked seeing that. It is also, like I said, I like books that are very heavy in their worlds. In this, like there is a lot about the show jumping world in it. Like there's a lot of information about that, but the author does it without like ostracizing people who don't know about that community. But like as someone who knows things about it, like I was like, oh, like I understood like sort of like in jokes that were in the book and stuff. I really liked it, and I really liked the ending for this story. I think a lot of thrillers wrap up in a kind of like, oh, but maybe it wasn't this person, or like maybe this didn't really happen kind of way, and this really went for it and like had a clear ending and like, yeah, really wrapped everything up in a bow, which I admired. I think some people could say it has like a Lord of the Rings problem where it just has like too many endings, but I really liked the way that like every single character had their story wrap up one way or another. I also read Tasting History by Max Miller. It's a cookbook, so I guess people could be like, Lulu, why are you putting a cookbook in here? But it's also like a real book. It has like pages of like analysis and historical documents about like food from different areas of the world. This book by Max Miller is a YouTuber, and he uses like recipes from history and makes them exactly as they were, and like talks about the historical context of the food item that he's making. And my husband and I really love his YouTube channel, so we split this book when we saw it at the store. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's like a near 5, which is a weird thing to say about a cookbook, but I think it's perfectly done. Like, I don't know. Yeah, the videos on his channel are well researched and bring me joy, and this cookbook is well researched and brings me joy. So all my expectations were met. I also read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I listened to it in audiobook form with my husband as our like spooky story for the year. It is also folk horror, like upmarket folk horror, and I think it shares a lot with The Unmothers. There's like a lot of overlap between those two books. In this book, a group of Blackfeet Native Americans on an ill-fated hunting trip wander into a zone that is reserved for elders for hunting, and in it they shoot an elk who is pregnant, so she's like in calf, and they kill her and her like unborn calf. 10 years later, the spirit of the elk comes back to take its revenge. I loved this story. I think as like a work of eco-fiction, it's wonderful. As a work of folk horror, it's wonderful. I really loved like the prose techniques and the characterization in this story. Yeah, I think it's like a really solid story, like structurally and prose-wise, and I'm excited to read more Stephen Graham Jones in the future. Another book I listened to in audiobook form was The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I'm reading this book for a video where I read like a television character that I really admire, and if you want a clue to who that is, another book I've read for that video was Swan's Way by Marcel Proust. And I think like Swan's Way, The Once and Future King is long. Editing Lulu here, and I want to linger on just how long The Once and Future King is for just a minute. So The Once and Future King is a series of books compiled into one. The audiobook for The Once and Future King is 33 hours long, making it longer than Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is 846 pages and 32 hours long. As an audiobook. I really love this book. I think comparing this read of The Once and Future King to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I did not feel as wrapped in the universe, and I just didn't enjoy it as much for the length of story that it was. It's also a reread for me. The last time I read it in book form alongside H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald. And I did that as a part of a book club the summer before my freshman year of college. And I really loved that experience. I thought for the video it was worth rereading because I haven't read it in like 8 years. And it is so beautiful, like as a meditation on power. So The Once and Future King is the story of King Arthur, or like the legend of King Arthur and like all of his Knights of the Round Table, but it integrates like anachronistic elements and like different fairy tale elements in a way that talks about the nature of power and the nature of righteousness and force and violence. And I love those like commentary aspects of it. But what I found on this listen, it's also, I think, very much worth listening to this in audiobook form because the narrator doing all of the different accents, quite a bit of this book is dialectical. So it's good to have a narrator there to do all of the different accents because sometimes when you're reading, it's hard to imagine them. And they are a big part of the story. Like what region of England or Albion like these characters are from matters a lot. So it's good to have someone like speaking the accents for me because I can't comprehend them sometimes. And I think overall I love this book, but I don't love this book as much as I want to, if that makes sense. Like there are moments in this story where I'm floored. And then there are moments in this story where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a 33-hour audiobook. Like Moby Dick was 21 hours and I loved Moby Dick, but like it's famously a long book. And The Once and Future King, 33 hours. There are moments in it I'm very aware of that. So I really feel like I should love this story, but I don't feel... And I care a lot about like power and violence, and I think about that a lot. So in my mind, I'm like, I should love this story. Overall, I don't think my heart connects with it as much as I want to, versus like the stories The Black Cauldron is based on, or the Black Cauldron movie is based on, The Chronicles of Prydain. My heart just clings to those immediately. But overall, I mean, I think no matter how many times you read The Once and Future King, you'll get something out of it, and it's definitely worth a read. The second to last book I want to talk about is The Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, and it is the second book in the All Souls trilogy, and it comes after A Discovery of Witches, with the name of the TV show that is based on the series. In this book, the main characters, Matthew and Diana, escape to the past. and are trying to find the Book of Life. I think it's really interesting to see like a historian talk about the past because she doesn't shy away. Yeah, Deborah Harkness does not shy away from making Matthew, who is the love interest of this story, like a 1500s-y dude while he's in the 1500s. He ingests opium and eats people in this story and like has some like weird morals with his father and like is possessive of Diana. It's like I'm kind of conflicted on that because it's like she did portray the person that she said that she was portraying. Like she didn't glamorize him. I think when we think of a novel like this, it would be like a romance novel where the guy, yeah, he's in the 1500s, but like he's still a feminist and like he still wants women to have freedom. And, you know, even though he's a vampire, even in the first book, like Matthew only, we don't see him like drink from a person like non-consensually. But in this book we do. And you know what? Like he's a vampire. But at the same time, it's like kind of weird to root for him. Kind of feels weird. I'm like, you should sort out your relationship with your father actually, and I don't think you should be bothered by other men touching your wife, you know? Also, Diana's powers like really grow in this story to the point where she's like God touched. So without using, point where she doesn't use spells, she just kind of thinks of what she wants and it appears kind of. She just asks a question and it gets answered. And we learn that she can do this because she was like gifted by the goddess and the goddess is granting her wishes. This power made me really think of like Julia's storyline in the Magician's trilogy by Lev Grossman. And in it, Julia is like God touched and she acquires godlike powers. What I think makes Julia's story more compelling than Diana's is the obstacles in Julia's life rise up to meet her at her level of skill. So we learn that like Julia thinks that she failed an entrance exam to a magical college in that story. And later we learn that Julia actually did great. It was just that like they were just experimenting. They were like, oh, we'll see what happens if this kid that we choose to like not get this kid in, or we choose not to admit her, and we'll see how she turns out, you know? And they just kind of like made a fickle decision to not let her in. Or like because she has godlike power, gods come after her. But yeah, anything that Julia like really, really wants, she really has to fight for at that level. Versus like Diana, it feels like Diana's always gonna be okay because she has infinite powers, and not everyone has infinite powers. She can fight most people without anyone's help, and then when she can't, she's married to a vampire who is like, I think at that time, like in the 1500s, he's actively sitting on like the governing body of magical things. So like nothing really feels like a big enough obstacle for Diana in this story because of the way that the magnitude of her power is written. So I was like not as satisfied with Shadow of Night. But I understand that people really love it. I think when I posted mean things about the first book, people were upset. And, you know, I agree with everything that I said about the first book, and I agree with everything Biz Barkley said in this lovely video that I absolutely love about this series. But still, I liked the first one enough to read the second one, and I liked the second one enough to read the third one, so I will be concluding that series. And lastly, I read The Nutcracker and the Mouseking by E.T.A. Hoffman, which is the short story that the Tchaikovsky ballet is originally based on. It's actually E.T.A. Hoffman wrote and published this short story, and then Alexandre Dumas, who wrote the Count of Monte Cristo and the Three Musketeers, wrote an adaptation of the story in French, and then Tchaikovsky got a hold of the French story and adapted that one into a ballet. But I loved The Nutcracker and the Mouseking. It reminded me a lot of like the Susana Clarke stories in the Jonathan Strange and like Mystery Norrell universe, like the kind of like fairy tales that Lady Pole says when she's got a rose at her mouth that are just kind of like gibberish but also wonderful. This read like that, and it is inspired by a German folk tale called King Thrushbeard. But in this story, it's like there's like a mouse royalty who wants to take revenge on a king and a queen. It's a lot. Okay, this story, like, it there's like an insane godfather in it who's a clockmaker who gifts his like Nutcracker to a child and then laughs at her for loving it. And then we hear later in the story that like the Nutcracker is his nephew. Like, why were you laughing at that little girl for loving your nephew who you wanted someone to love? Mouse royalty who are fighting with like actual Prussian royalty. There's a nut that breaks a curse. It's wonderful. I highly recommend anyone who likes an unhinged story locate The Nutcracker and the Mouseking by E.T.A. Hoffman. Hello, it's Editing Lulu again, because tell me why I didn't talk about Beach Read by Emily Henry. I also read this book this fall winter season. I think I've said repeatedly, Book Lovers was the first Emily Henry book I read, and I loved it. I loved it so much, and in every other Emily Henry book I've read, which I think is a few now, I've been kind of chasing that high that I felt from Book Lovers. So I've read Funny Story, which just like didn't click for me. I think in part because I do hate the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Like, no offense if you're a Youper. Funny Story was set in the Upper Peninsula, which is why I'm babbling on about it now, but it didn't click for me, and I don't think that the romance clicked for me either, but I think a lot of people seem to really love it. I think Jack Edwards loved it, but then my husband got me this edition of Beach Read. I thought I would give it a try because something I really do like about Emily Henry stories is that you are fully immersed in the world. And I talk about that a lot with romance novels. Like, I think a lot of the time, like, a romance novel will be set and it's like, oh, it's two fashion designers falling in love. And we hear, like, only a little bit about clothes. And it's like, no, I tuned in to hear about clothes. Like, I want to see these two people fall in love, but, like, I want clothes. And, like, Emily Henry does do a great job of delivering on the world of her story. This story is about a romance novelist and a literary fiction writer who were once academic rivals and end up, after a series of unfortunate events, living next to each other on the Michigan Peninsula. So we're back on the Michigan Peninsula, but I think the important thing for me connecting with it is that these two also kind of don't want to be there. And I think that that makes the story much more relatable to me. Because that was also my experience of the Michigan Peninsula. But yeah, I didn't love this one as much as Book Lovers, but I still really enjoyed Beach Read. I like writing, I like reading, so I was down for this world. But I do think like Charlie, the love interest in Book Lovers is like the kind of person I would be attracted to. But Gus, the love interest in this story, is me. I felt like kind of called out by it. He's just like, yeah, he's like a literary writer who had like a tough family upbringing, and the book talks about him constantly being kind of a mess and like constantly leaning on things and just like not being fully engaged. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a personal attack on me because I write literary fiction and despite my best efforts, I'm kind of a mess. So I felt a lot of empathy for Gus and January, who is the romance writer in this situation. And I think if you like a Rivals to Lovers, this situation, this does it really well. I don't mind a Rivals to Lovers, but it's not something that I like go after, but I really enjoyed it in this story. And that was, unfortunately, all my reads. Hopefully I'll finish a couple more books up by the end of the year. This is just what I've read in the fall and the beginning of the winter. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all soon. I'm working on a longer vlog about my graduate school application process, so hopefully I'll have that out soon as well. Anyway, I hope I'll see you guys again soon. Have a lovely week and stuff.